Hi, once again, dear listener. You are listening to the podcast of the Spirit Channel. This week's episode will just be about spirituality in general. Spirituality in regards to one who has just awakened to the spiritual life, who has awakened upon this planet. Before we do that, and I guess, there are many different forms of awakening. There is awakening to the truth of what is happening on this planet, of all the manipulations and the potential bad things and the crimes perhaps that have been committed and are constantly done with us in regards to the harmful chemicals that poison our food, our water, our air, of all the information that we're not being told, the truth about our history, the truth about our bodies, the truth about where we come from and where we're going, and all of the misinformation that is published out there. So that's a kind of, or that is a form of truth. It's a form of awakening. But generally, I find that the more that people delve into this stuff, it's like peeling layers of an onion back. You start down that path of perhaps conspiracy theory, of truth seeking in the world, and the more you kind of delve into that, the more you kind of start to reveal hidden truths and peel back, as I said, the layers of the onions and get down to the core of that. You pretty much sure quite a lot of people end up in the spiritual realm, and that's how a lot of people awaken to spirituality. So spiritual awakening is then another form, or a different kind, or a deeper state of truth seeking. It's a form of awakening that is non-material in matter. It's an awakening to the fact that we are constantly surrounded by an invisible world, or invisible worlds, invisible presences, and it's kind of like this invisible world that has been taking place all around you, right under your nose, and you're never even aware of it. So that is a completely different form of awakening. And what I want to talk about here is that especially for perhaps someone who has awakened spiritually, and they have perhaps a family or a partner or an other half or whatever. And I guess, and I'm also speaking from experience here, is that it can be hard for the person who has awakened significant other, their partner, their family. It's not easy. It's, as I've mentioned this before, it's not potentially easy on the person who has awakened. Okay, yes, at first it's all new, it's all exciting, it's extremely interesting, you can't get enough of it, but the further down that path that you travel, you begin to find that you begin to change as a person. And it's hard to lose aspects of yourself that you've grown up with, that you've grown accustomed to. It's hard to make changes in your life, and some of these changes are painful, if not necessary. But equally, it's hard on, as I mentioned before, the person who has awakened spiritually, their family, their other half, their significant other, their partner, whatever the case may be, someone who's extremely close to them, because that person who has awakened spiritually does change, does undergo transformation after transformation. And it's hard because, and again, I'm speaking here from someone who has awakened, not someone who's been on the other half of this divide. So what I'm trying to do is put myself into their shoes and to recollect as much of the conversations and disagreements that we have had regarding my own awakening. So, yes, it's hard on that person to watch that person change, especially if there has been no inkling of this or no interaction with anyone spiritual or anyone who has spiritual abilities or gifts before. It's hard to watch that person change before your eyes, and you can begin to feel that, or certainly that's how it seems, that you're beginning to lose a grip on that person. that person is changing from the person that you fell in love with, or have grown close to, or have grown up with. It's hard to see that person change. It's hard to know whether or not it's a good change or it's a change for the benefit, because you're not sharing that change together. You're simply watching another person change. And certainly from my own experience, the significant other, or the person that's important to me in my life, deemed it cultish. It can appear to be very cultish. And it's hard if that other person is religious. It can seem that perhaps it's a negative thing, that it goes against a religion. It's operating against that person's religion. And so, while this is extremely not the case, it's difficult nonetheless. It's difficult when that person needs a lot of time in their own, is consumed by research, consumed by knowledge, or knowledge seeking. And that person, as I mentioned before, does undergo change, does undergo many transformations. And with that transformation, a lot of the things that that person perhaps once had an interest in, that perhaps you both had an interest in, begin to fall away. So it is a massive upheaval in people's lives, and it can lead to disagreements. It can lead to arguments. It can lead to perhaps a demand that the other person cease what they're doing and return to the person that they once were. But it's once the rabbit is out of the box. I don't even know if that's the correct analogy I'm reaching for. Once the toys are out of the box, once Pandora's box is open, it can't close again. You just can't stop this. And it's not to say that you should embrace it, or the other person should embrace it, or that they should just give in. It's more a recognition that ultimately this is a process that someone is going through, that someone that perhaps you love or are intimate with or have a connection with in some regard. But it will lead for the better if it's done correctly. The things that begin to fall away are things of a transient nature. They're not particularly important. Interests, hobbies, programs, television, foods even. I've mentioned all this before. I actually have a pin on my Pinterest account, which I'll link to on this, which shows signs and symptoms of a spiritual awakening, which can be helpful for someone who is perhaps on the other end of this, that is watching someone undergo an awakening. And this is not a quick, short-term thing. It is something that is going to unfold and develop throughout the other person's life. And it can be exceedingly slow at times, and it can be exceedingly frustrating for that other person, because, as I said in the beginning, it's exciting, it's all new. Growth, development is quick. A lot of things begin to happen and change, and it can be disifying, but it does slow down. And I'm trying to think of an analogy here. It's like perhaps scaling a mountain. The lower peaks or the start of it can be surmounted very quickly and very easily, but the more you begin to reach the higher peaks, the higher plateaus, the more difficult the terrain becomes, and so the progress is slower. I hope that makes sense. So the more that you grasp, or the more that the other person potentially grasps or develops or seeks to develop, then the slower that progress becomes, because you're grasping for deeper spiritual growth. And it can be a frustrating process, because there really is no user manual that you can pick up and read potentially together that explains how this will happen. It is unique to everyone. Everyone has their own form. Everyone has their own tale of spiritual awakening. Not everyone experiences the same thing. But knowledge in this is absolutely key. And hopefully a podcast like this here can help either people or perhaps someone who's on the opposite end of the spiritual awakening to understand exactly what is going on. So when I say frustrating, it can be frustrating because with a lack of knowledge about how something like this unfolds, you seem to think, or perhaps the person who is undergoing an awakening seems to think that progress should be continued and developed at a steady pace, and that is far from the case. Yeah, you may think, or certainly the person who is having the awakening may think that they are ready for more growth, they're ready for more learning, and wonder why they don't seem to feel or see any change within themselves. And they can be trying all different types of techniques, all different types of experiments to potentially, get more growth a bit more sooner. But it doesn't happen like that. And so it leads to a very sense of frustration. You can actually throw the head up, or see that other person throw the head up or get exasperated with it. And it's like short-circuiting. It's like short-circuiting yourself or short-circuiting themselves, and it can lead to us feeling despondent and a mood of I wouldn't quite say depression, but something akin to that, a very low ebb in which that person potentially rejects spiritual development, rejects the whole concept of it, and deems that they're going to return to a normal life or a normal state of being. But it doesn't happen like that. Very, very rarely will that happen, because you just keep getting drawn back into it. So I guess for the person on the opposite end of this, that person who they care about, or who they are extremely friendly with or share a connection with, can be like a yo-yo, or can be like a wave with an ebb and flow, a crest, a peak, and a low point, and it can be, their mood can be up and down. So it's equally hard in that other person. Not only are they dealing with watching someone who they thought that they knew change beyond perhaps what they thought could happen, but they also have to deal with mood swings, low ebbs, mood emotions, swirling emotions, and this can have a very sapping effect on that person. And as I said, if there is no help, if there is no research, if there is no someone there to offer words of encouragement or words of support, or to explain what is happening, it can seem like this is a very destructive, divisive thing. And then it becomes only natural that this person, perhaps out of a sense of protection or a sense of worry, asks or perhaps demands that that person who is undergoing their spiritual awakening stop doing what is perceived to be harmful activities. And so it can lead to, as I said, a series of disagreements, a series of arguments, fights. So it's very important, if possible, to have some sort of mentor or some sort of guide in in your lives, or is accessible to perhaps the person who is undergoing the awakening, or perhaps both parties, the person on the other side of the divide, that can help provide reassurance and information and support whenever needed, to explain what exactly is happening and perhaps that what can be expected. Feeling that it is perhaps necessary, or perhaps not perhaps, it is extremely helpful if you can find maybe a guide like this here, or something that you can perhaps read or both share, to understand exactly what is happening, what is transpiring, how this is affecting you, and how it can be affecting, and ways in which to reduce the stress and anxiety and uncertainty within your relationship or within your companionship. Ultimately, this can and will draw the other person in. So although there may only be one person who is really having this spiritual awakening, the knock-on effect of that, and the transformation for the better, I may add, for the better of the other person in regards to the sharing of unnecessary things like habits or personality traits, or destructive character traits, or perhaps addictions in some way, will ultimately draw the person on the other side of the divide into. Because if this is a person who you are intimate with, or affectionate with, or very close with, then you will see the transformation in them, and you will see how ultimately in the long term it has been beneficial for them. So you can't help but wonder and copy, or perhaps inquire about what it is that they're doing different, because this is a transformation and a life-changing event that is and will be, if applied properly and if, as I said, researched properly, beneficial to that person. Looking at my life, I have there's so many things that have changed about me. I'm a completely and utterly different person from the person that I was before, and it's only perhaps when a number of years pass that you look back and realize, how different a person that you've become. But on top of that, as I said, there are a number of other things that I said that have changed. I've got more in tune with nature, a more compassionate, more forgiving, more loving, more tolerant person, more patient person. I've cut out a lot of unhealthy food habits and addictions like alcohol in my diet. So I've definitely started looking after my body a lot more. I take very good care of what chemicals that I ingest or wash with or bathe with. I don't binge watch television. I certainly do not watch television in the capacity that I used to. I have researched so much and learned so much, and that has had a knock-on effect on, as I said, the person in my life, the significant other in my life, and it is all for the good. Now, that is not to say that everything in your life will change. It's just more about, as I said, the shedding of things that are no longer necessary for you. It's like a rocket. You see a rocket, leaving Earth. It takes off from the ground, a big fireball, to propel it up into the atmosphere to escape gravity. And we see it going into the stratosphere and eventually into the ionosphere, I think, and before it reaches space itself. And at different stages of that rocket's journey, you'll see pieces of it falling away because they're no longer necessary, or perhaps used up, spent, or expired. And they're no longer necessary for that rocket's journey for the next stage. So it can be like that there, and it is a change for the positive. It is a change for the good. But at the time, it just doesn't seem like it. It really doesn't. It can be frightening. It can be upsetting, because of the uncertainty around it, because of the lack of knowledge that generally concerns us here. And I don't know about you, but I haven't really come across too many guides, if any, that have really explained perhaps about this. Maybe I haven't really researched it, but I have researched and read, listened to and watched so much uncountable information in my spiritual journey, and there hasn't particularly been, as I said, one thing that I could turn around and say, right, this is what's happening to me. This is what's transpiring with me, and this is potentially what can happen and what will happen. I did have a mentor in my life, the person who introduced me to spirituality, but it didn't. But we just ended up, for one reason or another, kind of drifting slightly apart, and I felt that I was at a stage then where there was little to, perhaps that's not quite right, but there was really not much more that this individual could really teach me. I found that I actually began to inform this person themselves, and I just felt that although that this person was a medium, I just felt that I've mentioned this before, that mediumship is just one small part of this, and I felt that I was moving in different directions, and I was growing and expanding beyond perhaps, or in ways that this person perhaps could not quite grasp. So I've largely, well, I wouldn't say I've largely been on my own. Eventually what happened was I ended up creating my own small social media group, which I haven't really recounted the detail. I haven't actually, not that I haven't really, but I haven't mentioned that at all, because it's not really relevant to anything that I have been mentioning. But I just was in contact with a number of spiritual people and just happened to group them all together, and that's kind of where it's been at the minute. So in that small group, we share concepts and ideas, and it's largely myself who does that. But yeah, to get back to it, if you don't have something like this, or some mentor, or some organization or place that you can go to help you understand this, perhaps a guide like this here should be, and hopefully will be, very useful to you. But also, as I mentioned before, if you both, or perhaps I'm assuming that this is two people I'm speaking to, it could be a number of people, but if you allow this process to grow organically on its own, then and just kind of roll with it, and just go with the flow and see where it leads, without fear, without trepidation, and know that it is a beautiful unfolding process, and it's completely natural. Then what you will find is that there will be a lot of assistance given to you in regards to this here, and perhaps that if you're the person on the other side of the fence in regards to this here, you may find too that you may begin to open up. As a matter of fact, this is quite common. Perhaps not to the extent, but perhaps as well. I know of people who have experienced this together and have fed off each other. But if you're the person on the other side of the fence, if you roll with this, if you go with the flow, if you see where it leads you, then perhaps you too will have your own experiences and will open up to a small or large degree, depending on how open you are to it and how much that you may wish it, and how committed you are to it, and perhaps if it's in your life path. I would say that if you are the partner or the friend or the love interest or whatever the case, or just family member who is committed to this other person and is watching them open spiritually and develop spiritually, then it is by no accident, and it is probably something that you agreed upon before you came into this incarnation, and no doubt that you will be having similar experiences at some point down your line. Again, it all depends on how interested and how open you are to the prospect. But as I said, it can be all those potential negative things, because change is hard, and we resist change, even if we know it's for the better. I mean, think of the possibility of a new job, or a move away to another location, or some change in, I don't know, lifestyle. Even if you know that it's good for you, it can be hard to make those changes, because we kind of get settled into familiarity. We know what awaits us each day, and so taking that I was going to say that leap of faith. I was taking that opportunity, or taking that grasping the nettle can be difficult, and but if you don't potentially know that this is good for you, if you are kind of on your own and don't know much about this, then it becomes even harder, because it is a leap into the unknown, an uncertain future, with no conviction or no assurance that you're doing the right thing. But as I said, hopefully this guide here, hopefully this podcast may prove useful to anyone who is undergoing a spiritual awakening, or anyone who is perhaps on the other side of the fence and is in close contact with someone they care about who is undergoing this process. And hopefully it will provide some information, some reassurances, some clear vision, some clear-cut answers as to what they expect, and to understand and anticipate changes in one's personality and one's ego or outlook in life. So with that, I'm going to leave you, dear listener. If there's anything that you would like to ask about this, if you have any questions, if there's something that I missed, because I normally record these and then afterwards I always go, damn, I forgot to talk about this. But this is the nature of recording something off the cuff, of recording something without a script. So if there's something that I've missed, if there's something that I haven't explained properly, if there's just something that you'd like a bit of advice on, feel free to contact me, feel free to get in touch. Drop me a comment, drop me a question, record a note, or contact me via email, which should hopefully be somewhere in this podcast website of mine. If not, you'll find contact details on the blog. I've been your host, Zenith, and it is my pleasure once again to record something of interest for you, and hopefully you will return next time and tune in and listen to further episodes. So bye for now.